Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another starter deck review. Today, we're going to talk about Call of the Curse, which, if you are a control player, if you've been wondering how the control style of decks will play out in Battle Spirit Saga, then this is absolutely the deck for you. Call of the Curse is going to feature things like core removal, draw effects, when your cards die, and then also a keyword called Curse, which is going to make it very difficult for your opponent to block, and goes very well with an X-Rare in the first set that was already revealed, but that's going to be a little bit later video when we talk about how would we upgrade Call of the Curse. But for just today's video, we're going to talk about the review and each one of the cards, so let's dive right into it. So up first, we have Dark King Snake Pendocles. Quick note about this as a sidebar, this was changed from the earlier reveal, so clearly they're playtesting the cards, which is a great sign. But let's talk about his effects. So again, this is the X-Rare. This is your key spirit, as the term goes in Battle Spirits, and this is going to be your X-Rare. So hopefully very soon we'll get to see what the X-Rare foiling looks like, but it's absolutely gorgeous from the Japanese Battle Spirits. I really hope they keep it. So Level 1, 2, and 3, when summoned, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove all but one core from it, and place it into their reserve. Now, this is very, very important for two things to call out. One, this is an expensive card, so it is a 7 cost with only a reduction of 3. So to get the full effect, or to be able to play as and put a core on it, and try to get to level 2 if you want to get that secondary effect, is going to be one of your very late game plays. But when comboed with its other effect, with one attack, you get to remove a core, you can clearly and easily remove one of your opponent's best spirits. However, there will be other cards that we'll talk about today, and certainly in the first set, they'll also then shoot one core off of your opponent's spirit. So you can combo this Dark King with one other card in your deck to act as a removal. So as we all know, if you've been following the games or if you just know how that interaction goes, having spirits on board is very, very important because they all have haste. So this, or no summoning sickness, depending on what game you're coming from. So you can get the full value out of this in one turn. 4,000 at level 1 is really nice. It does help get around things like landmine and some of the lower end removal. However, there is that card Flame Breath, which I think is going to start seeing a little bit more play depending on how the meta shakes out, which is like more of your anti-mid-range tech. So you might need to be able to bring this in at the level 3, which costs, the level 2, which costs 3 cores, which is 6,000, to bring it up above that barrier. So there is going to be a little bit of a give and take depending on what level your summoning is at, based on which matchup you're playing into, but that'll ultimately come down to game knowledge, and just once the meta evolves a bit more, we'll have a better idea. So general, very good control style of card with core removal. However, Serpent hasn't seen a keyword family like we've seen for Pterosaurs or we've seen for Star Dragon, so that doesn't seem too important yet. But we might see something within the set 1 where you suddenly care about the number of serpents you have. But otherwise, very strong control style of card. If you're playing purple, I can't imagine a deck that's not wanting to play this other than like a low cost aggro deck, which we will see in some of the future reveals. So most people, I think, will be very excited for this card. And then talking about some of those kind of low to the ground aggressive strategies, we're going right into Dragonaga Assassin. So again, another serpent card. So not that that family has too many things it cares about it right now, but something that could be interesting later on. So level 2 and level 3, while the spirit attacks, you get Curse. If one of your opponent's spirits blocks, destroy it when the battle ends. So this is your Death Touch from Magic, and I'm sure other card games have had similar terms, but I think most people just refer to it as Death Touch. So this is a very offensive ability, and later on we are going to see things that reward us for having our creatures removed or destroyed or getting other effects, getting them back from the graveyard. So this all around just does a lot what we want to be doing with it. But then on top of that is the level 3, which, yes, it does require 3 cores, so it does put it kind of in line with the Parasaur, or Ducky Dino Draw, as I call him, from the red starter deck. But when he has a soul core on it, you get to draw a card on attack. So this is really great that you can threaten an attack. If they block, they're going to lose their card, and you've already drawn a card, so it does replace itself. What's interesting, though, too, is, as we're going to see both in the starter and if you've been keeping up with the rest of the spoilers, there is a lot of cards in purple that care about soul core, and you get 1. So I think that's going to be a very interesting deck building limit and or consideration, because you can't have 3 different spirits on the field that all require soul core to get their main effect, because then you're having to pick and choose from them. And again, you might want to have some of those that are blockers anyway, so then you freely attack with this guy, for example, because if they block it, now they're losing their spirit, and you're still drawing a card off of it anyway. So there's definitely some kind of give and take. The card in mind is Python that I'm thinking of, where it's just like a flat draw. And that was spoiled, I think, like last week or a little bit before. So I'm really curious to see where this ends up, where we've seen in Star Nova, right, is you're going to burn your Soul Core at the top end, so you don't play that many Soul Core effects. But in purple, it really cares about it. So think about that when you're building your deck, how many things use Soul Core, and which effect do you really want to get off in each turn. So I do like this one that it goes up to 4K. So again, it can get around things like Landmine and some of that, the Burning Force, the lower end removal. So as of right now, I guess, and to stop myself from repeating so much, the two breakpoints so far seem to be 3K and 6K. So those are the two magical numbers that you're going to want to keep in the back of your mind while you're looking at some of these cards and evaluating where their strength is going to lie and what type of removal or interaction you can expect. So again, 3,000 and 6,000 are the two magic numbers, at least for now. That could definitely change with set 1 spoilers. All around, very solid card. Up next, we have Segro Snake. Again, a serpent, so lots of snakes in this first one. During your attack step, if there's a soul core on the spirit, it cannot be blocked by any of your opponent's spirits with only 1 core on them. So this one's interesting. It only has a cost reduction of 1, so the cheapest would be is 2. And it's only a 1K or 3K power. So this is, low to the ground, but at the same time, you're probably going to line up a strategy that focuses on putting a soul core on him and just getting through with that unblocked damage because you have so much core removal available to you in both the starter deck and what we'd expect in set 1. So by itself, I mean, it might not be the most exciting thing. It's really going to come down to, do we care about Serpent? How much core removal, consistent core removal do we have? But it does fit in the starter deck quite nicely for what we have seen. So not terribly excited for this card, kind of where it sits today, but could very well be a staple later on, depending on what type of support we see out of the first set. Moving on to more of our core removal is Mummirra, Undead. So we did see a second tag, family tag, get added here with Undead. When summoned, level 1 and 2, select one of your opponent's spirits, remove a core from it, and place it into the reserve. So this is where it starts to get interesting. One of the key things about purple as we talk about core removal and how it fundamentally changes the game, at least in the Japanese version of Battle Spirits, and I'm sure with the last card of this starter deck that you'll see and some of the other effects we'll get, it really changes the game so much when you go from okay, all my spirits only need 1 core on them because it doesn't matter and I want to go wide, to, oh, but if I only leave 1 core on this spirit and they have a card like the Mummirra, it's going to be gone. And it gives them very, very high value removal in that sense. But if you're putting 2 or 3 or 4 cores on your spirits so that they can play around this removal, then that's 2, 3, or 4 other spirits, that you're not going to have, or I should say 1, 2, or 3 other spirits you're not going to have in the field. So then does purple just come back and play this low cost spam and then go wide against you, right? So there's a lot of give and take in the different matches and how they're going to play out, which is why we saw Rex has that kind of condition on him, right? Where it's really strong if you can only put 1 core on him, but against purple, you don't have that luxury. So I love how much purple is going to change the game, even from the demo decks, even from the red starter deck mirror matches we've seen. This is really the color that embodies the heart and soul of Battle Spirits and what makes it so unique with the cores. And don't get me wrong, every color uses the cores in some wonderful way, but when you start to have to really change up your game plan and understand, okay, do I want this at level 2? Do I want this at level 3? Can I afford to go wide here? Are they going to have a card that's going to remove multiple cores? It really makes you think about what spirits you want to play when to get the removal out of your opponent's hand. This card, it is a little costly for the effect, but it's basically free removal. Again, it's a 1K or a 5K, so the 5K part's at least interesting for a blocker perspective. But I think if you're playing such a control-focused deck, this card is absolutely one that you're going to want to play. Anything that removes cores and can get you an effect, like we'll see later on, to surprise your opponent, can be very, very strong. So it really just comes down to, what does our core removal suite look like? But I wouldn't be surprised if this finds a home somewhere. And then the good old demo bones. Can we just appreciate how great this art is? Like, I love this little dude. So now that we've had both the purple starter and the red starter, there is this theme of, vanillas that you probably play just because it helps with your core reduction strategies. But do you want to play this one or the other, I think they're both 3 drops actually, and the red and purple starter, to have like a little bit higher of a battle power unit, right? So again, Undead doesn't matter right now. It is a 1-drop vanilla that plays the Rain Needle role where you can just play it for free and help with your cost reductions. But this one, interestingly, caps out at 3K and not 4, and that is pretty significant. But if you're playing this early on for a cheap blocker or cost reduction effects, you probably don't care that it's going to be a 1,000, it's going to die most of the time, right? That's the role that he's going to fill, and that's perfectly fine. So if Undead matters like it did for Star Dragons, of course, that's going to be another consideration. But for right now, it's just a vanilla spirit. We have to see where the rest of set 1 goes. Moving on beyond that, we have Mummyphant. Same thing, right? This one's nice because it does have 3 cost reduction, so it can be a 1-costed 3K, and this one does go up to 6K as well, so this gives you more of that like mid-range option. Also undead, don't know if that tag is going to matter or not, but same thing as the last one, right? It's a vanilla spirit. We will play some number of vanilla spirits just by how the game is designed and what we can expect from set 1, but do you want to play the more early game blockers because, Red Rush and Yellow Rush is so prevalent? Or do you want to play these more kind of mid-range threats that can go up to 6,000 power because everyone's playing like, a little bit of a go taller strategy instead of go wide? So remains to be seen. Love the lore bits that are on both these cards, but for now, they are just vanilla spirits and not much to really say about them. Up next, we have another curse card. I think it's Okapandle. Correct me on the pronunciation. I did a Google search. Fun fact, this does not appear anywhere, so I have no idea. But 4 costs with 2 reduction with curse at level 1 and level 2. So this is where it starts to get interesting, right? Curse, by its effect and what we've seen from the X-Rare, is really a more aggressive strategy. And your opponent, there's no confront here, so your opponent can always just take the life. But at some point, they can't take the life anymore. So curse becomes very problematic for them to deal with. So looking back at what we had for, I think it was Maduke was the name, for the X-Rare in set 1, that's going to be all focused on curse and blood curse, where the other half of this is going to be core removal with the Dark King Snake. So just like we saw at the red starter deck, there's going to be your Star Dragons, there's going to be your more aggressive curve, which are going to diverge into 2 completely different decks. So the starter decks, if you want to play purple in set 1, you have to buy 2 purple starter decks. Just go out and buy them, and that way you'll have all of your bases covered. Which one is more exciting to you? You'll have to test them out and see what other spoilers look like, but I'm glad that I kind of like this compared to like One Piece. I think I mentioned this in the previous video, so I won't say about it too much, but it really goes back to, hey, I just like red as a color. I will buy the red starter deck and it'll automatically have all the key staples that I want for red. So there's no like having to buy multiple starters, or there's no having to buy multiple X-Rares if you want or not. Like, you're going to buy it by proxy of liking that color. And then later on, if you decide to change it up, you already have it, right? It's not split up in multiple things. So I think overall, I do like, now that I'm like coming around to it, I do like their starter deck strategy, but I'm really curious to see where curse ends up now that we have an X-Rare from it from set 1, but what other type of curse effects will we get? So if you're playing curse, this is great. Obviously more to say about this, and I'll probably do like a archetype review of sorts when the full set 1 launches out and talk about like curse and Maduke and all that stuff at a high level. But for now, pretty middle of the road of what we'd expect. It has curse on 1 and 2, which is nice, but it caps out at 4K. So curious to see where this one ends up. More curse, 2 drops. So again, a low drop that can help you build out some of those cost reduction effects. Dark Knight Florence. This one's interesting because it's only on level 2, so do have to be careful. Is it on level 1? Is it on level 2? Is it on both? What have you, right? So this one is only when he's a 3K power, has curse. Again, that death touch ability. If we see a curse style of deck, which I'm 100% sure we will, this is going to be basically an auto play because it is a 2-drop, helps on the lower end of your curve, and you do need a certain threshold of curse spirits in your deck to get value at the top end. So all around solid card, probably does everything what you want it to do in the curse deck. Moving on to more vanillas, and this one is Nightling. So again, we had Serpent, Undead, and now Nightling, which none of these have mattered so far, but it's a 2 cost, 2 reduction. So this, by its cost and looking at the vanilla power level, probably just going to be an early aggressive cost reducer. So will it matter? We might have to see, but for a vanilla card, this one, I think we've only seen like 2 or 3 Nightlings, so very unlikely to have the Serpent or Undead tag that might be relevant later on. But if you need a early drop cost reducer, then yeah, this card is okay for what it wants to be doing. After that, we have Phasmobat, which is very exciting. So it is a 3 cost of 1 reduction, so a little bit more on the expensive side, but at its level 2 and 3, when the spirit attacks, draw a card if your opponent has a spirit with only 1 core on it. So this goes back again to some of the other spirits that we've seen that either remove a core when they're summoned, or the Pendocles, which can strip them down to 1, right? There's a couple different ways you're going to be able to enable this, and you're playing it early on anyways for cost reduction. And then when you are able to line up the core removal, you get a free draw out of it as well. So purple really does have quite a number of ways to just churn through their deck and draw some extra cards, which does make sense at the point of their spirits are generally weaker, but you can hopefully bring them. I'm sure we're going to see a graveyard strategy at some point, but the fact that they replace themselves by card draw is one of those ways you can just keep refilling the field and not feel too bad about it. Again, only at a 3K or 4K power level, it's for sure dying at that point. But if you're just trying to cycle through your deck and find your key spirit, or maybe you're looking for a core removal, that's fine. Like, it does what you want it to do. So very solid card. I'm sure it'll see play somewhere. Stray Soul is another one that was revealed early on. 3 costs with 1 reduction, but a when summon effect. Select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits and remove a core from it. So again, if they go from 1 core to 0, they die. It's gone. So this is basically your removal effect. It's cheap enough so you can play it early on in your curve, especially in the early game. It's very hard to both build out your cost reduction and have more than 1 core on your spirits. So this is probably just going to be free removal. Absolute staple if you're trying to play a more purple control deck that has a Darkling tag. Again, no idea if that's going to be relevant or not yet, but very solid purple card for purple doing purple things. Up next, we have Dark Grail. So finally getting into our Nexus cards, a 3 cost with 1 reduction. When placed, select one of your opponent's spirits with 2 or more. So again, there is going to be very careful wording. You have to be very mindful of the type of core removal you have on each one of these effects because it can differ slightly. Remove a core from it and place it in the reserve. So this one, interestingly, is not a removal spell in that sense because it'd be way too good. But it does give you, again, the Nexus with cost reduction is really important because interactions with Nexus cards are quite limited. And much like we've seen with the red starter deck, it has a very expensive level 2, but some pretty spicy stuff you can get out of it, right? So during your attack step, draw a card when one of your purple spirits is destroyed. So if you are playing a more, low to the ground, you just want to turn a bunch of stuff sideways with Curse, right? Now suddenly you're changing the state where I'm going to swing with my spirits. They all have Curse, they all have Death Touch, and I'm threatening your life. But on top of that, I am now drawing a card when each one of them is destroyed. Now it is only your attack step, right? This is a more aggressive focused strategy, so it's not defensive in any nature of that regard. That's going to be left for white, which we'll be getting those reveals starting tomorrow. But this is a very solid card, and I have to imagine this sees play in the Curse deck, which we will again see more support for in set 1. So not terribly excited for it from the second effect if you think about the core stripping part, but all around this is a very solid card for what purple wants to be doing. So I for sure expected to see play in the Curse deck, and then the first effect is probably just good enough for your core depletion strategies. Purple Smoke Valley is our other Nexus card with a 4 cost and 1 reduction. Draw a card when one of your effects destroys one of your opponent's spirits via reducing its cores to 0. So again, this is just a pure core strip ability, but then also the second part is interesting. Your spirits with Curse cannot be blocked by your opponent's spirits with only 1 core on them. So now we found this like secondary condition where Curse can now also become unblockable if you need them to, again, depending on how you line up your core removal stuff, depending on the spells you use. So this is interesting because that is absolutely going to become relevant at some point. But one of the things to note is it's a Nexus card, so it's not like it's a haha gotcha by a magic that you're playing that you hold in your heart. It is public information, so your opponent can quite easily, air quotes there, play around it by making sure they have enough core on their spirits. But again, we have ways to interact with all the cores they have on their spirits, via spells, via spirit summon effects. There's gonna be a lot of ways to bring this online for you. So I do love both of these purple Nexus cards, certainly a lot more than I like the red ones. And maybe that's just because I'm a control player at heart, but I think both these are very interesting for the different strategies that they're going to allow. And I'm curious to see what these numbers are going to end up like. Poison Shot, it's a 5 cost, which seems expensive, but hang on with me. 3 cost reduction, a burst when opponent destroys your spirit, draw a card, and then if you pay the cost, so you get to just cycle one of your spirits for free, draw a card. Great. Select one spirit, remove a core from it, and place it into its owner's reserve. So this is an interesting one because this is one of the cards in this deck that I think might get splashed in other areas, because just being able to cycle any of your spirits is going to be pretty good. But keep in mind is you do not get the cost reduction. So then the main flash effect is significantly harder to play in other decks. But if you think about it, if you want to kind of like one up your opponent, if you're playing a red versus red mirror match and they're playing Rex, if you're on red, 10 out of 10 times they're going to summon Rex with 1 core on it because they're going to try to go wide. So you can definitely use this as a haha gotcha, but because the game's probably going to be best of 3, that might not work game 2 and game 3, right? But I think it's still one of the things I really love about Battle Spirits and Battle Spirits Saga is that you can splash these effects, and depending on where some of the other burst effects or lineup, it can really leave your opponent guessing on what card do you have down and how much value are you really going to get out of it. So this is where we really start to see like the multiple layers of strategy of Battle Spirit Saga build up, and I'm really curious to see where else Poison Shot sees play, because all around, love this card. Obviously, if you're playing purple, does everything you want it to do in purple. It's cheap enough. It's great. It's magnificent even. But I think it might be good enough to see pretty considerable consideration outside of just purple decks. And then Core Drain, finally, the real spice of it all. So 3-cost magic with 2 reduction, so it can cost only 1, which is really, really cheap. But main, select one of your opponent's exhausted spirits. So yes, it does have to be exhausted, but remove up to 3 cores from it and place it in their reserve. So if they attack with a big spirit and you live, this is just removal. Like it will kill most, 9 out of 10 times if your opponent has spirits on the board and is trying to have any sort of go wide strategy. Core Drain is going to kill exactly what you want it to kill. So this again plays into that we want to have cheap blockers to make sure we can live, but this card slaps, does everything you want it to do in the purple drain strategy, and being able to remove 3 cores is a significant amount. And then plus if we had the Nexus that we just talked about, now we're drawing cards off of it too. Yeah, cards insane. And then the other one that I think is really spicy is Bloody Rain. 4 cost, 2 reduction. It's a burst. Your opponent cannot, so the burst condition is when you lose life. So you do have to lose that first life. But your opponent cannot attack the spirit during this turn unless they remove a core from it and place it into their reserve. And then the flash effect you don't care about. So this one's super interesting because, again, if you're playing red versus red mirror, or if you're going up against like a yellow deck that's always going to want to go wide, you take that first life, you flip this over, and suddenly, like, yeah, they have 6 spirits, but if they only have 1 core on them, they go to attack, they remove it, they die. So this is a really, really strong, again, perhaps more situational card that I think is going to get a lot of people. And this is a very splashable card for how the games, be it a mirror match or depending on what you're playing against, can really shape out. So this is, again, the very, very strong effect for what it wants to be doing. And as the Resident Yellow fan, I'm scared of this card because this does completely shut you off for the turn in a lot of cases. And sometimes that's all you need. Like just getting one more turn with some decks, especially if you're playing like that big old Nova or something, that can be significant. So Bloody Rain, I think, again, you probably are playing it anyways in purple because the effect can be very strong. But this is the other card that I think is like, wow, this could be really, really big for other for non-purple decks, right? For splashing in cards. So, and again, it's a burst, so your opponent doesn't know. They have to kind of guess and see what would be the worst case scenario for it. So all around, like getting both Bloody Rain and Poison Shot, like these are the cards that really got me excited for Battle Spirits Saga, or I should say for Battle Spirits in terms of the splashability and the effects they had. And now we're getting me really excited for Battle Spirits Saga because these are the like mind tricks that I want to end up playing and seeing which one of these cards are splashable. Because yes, it's telling your opponent you have a burst set, but what is it going to be? So really love the mind games that you get to play with these cards. And with that, we are at the end of the purple starter deck. So if you're a control player, are you excited to play the more core removal and drawing a bunch of cards? Or are you still a fan mostly of the red and star dragons that want to have the big mid-range value? I'm so excited that tomorrow should start white spoilers. So in 2 days, we're going to have a video on that, which is another control color. And I think between purple and white, we'll have a really good sense of the power level of the game to determine, what type of removal, what type of interaction do we get. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting time, like a week from now, once we have all the starters put together, people can play on Tabletop Simulator and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for watching. That was our second starter deck review. There's 2 more to go, so those will be available, same day when the full spoiler is out. Hopefully you've seen this image shared on social media and all that stuff. Feel free to share it with your friends, get them excited. And then the very last thing I'm going to add in here is the Battle Spirit Saga main site was updated, and they're hinting about demo decks available and a road, BSS hits the road type of style where even more demo events might be coming up, and we might see some spicy news within the next week. So please look forward to a video if we do get it, but otherwise it'll just be on socials and whatnot. So with that, my friends, have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.